first thing you should do when you sit down to sew is to check the settings on your sewing machine. If you don't, you'll probably end up trying to stitch and find that somebody left it in the wrong place. So to avoid a lot of frustration, always check your settings before you start stitching. We're going to start up here at the top, looking at the tension dial. We want to make sure the tension dial has the red line lined up. Is the red line lined up? Good. Second, we're going to look at the decorative stitch selector. You always want this green line to be at the very bottom when you're doing a straight stitch, which is what you most often need to use. So, to move this green bar to the bottom, I'm going to pull this lever to the right and then pull it down until that green bar moves to the bottom. Then I can let the lever go back to the left. Third, we're going to check the bobbin winder spindle. If it's to the right, that means somebody wound a bobbin last and left it in the wrong position. So we need to push that to the left so that we can sew. The next thing we need to check is the flywheel. Your hand wheel has two parts, this smooth outer ring, which is the hand wheel itself, and this textured inner ring, which is the flywheel. If it's loose, you can wiggle it back and forth. That means it's been disengaged, and somebody was probably winding a bobbin before you sat down. We need to re-engage it so that we're able to stitch. To do that, hold on to this outer hand wheel, and then turn, with your other hand, turn the flywheel away from you until it's tight. You don't need to over-tighten it so that nobody will be able to loosen it again, but just make sure it's fairly snug. Now we're going to look at all the knobs on the front of your machine. First, we're going to check the stitch width selector. We're going to turn that all the way to the left so that it's lined up to 0. Next, the needle position selector, which should be pointed straight up. Next, the buttonhole knob. Buttonhole knob should be at 0. Then we'll come down here to the stitch length selector. See how it's all the way down at 5? Somebody was probably basting before you sat down. So let's twist this knob until it's at proper regulation stitching, which is 2.5. Now we need to make sure the decorative stitch knob is turned to green, and the sewing knob, the feed dog knob, is to the zigzag with the dotted line. If it's set to the crosshatch, then your feed dogs will be dropped and your machine won't push your fabric through on its own, so you won't have an even length of stitch. So let's turn that so that the feed dogs are re-engaged. Lastly, we need to check the take-up lever. See how you can't see the take-up lever poking up right here? You need to turn the hand wheel, always turn the hand wheel towards you until that take-up lever is right at the top. When it's at the top, it's ready to start a new row of stitching, and the needle will be all the way up at the top. That should be everything. Happy sewing!